If I were a crooked politician. If I were a crooked politician, I would begin quietly. Not with a speech, not with a scandal. Oh no, that would be far too obvious. Instead, I would begin with a smile, a firm handshake, a campaign slogan that sounded like it meant something, but actually meant nothing at all. Opportunity, security, working families, freedom, words soft enough to say everything and specific enough to promise absolutely nothing. And then I would ask you for money. Not from you, of course. From the people who can write checks with more zeros than a middle-class family earns in a decade. I would create something called a PAC, and then a super PAC, and then a nonprofit advocacy organization that is neither nonprofit nor charitable. And the beautiful part? You would call it democracy. Now, if I were a crooked politician, I would never actually write laws myself. Oh, heavens, no. That would require work. Instead, I would allow lobbyists to write them for me. They already have the lawyers. They already have the spreadsheets. And best of all, they already have the money. So when a tax bill comes along, a bill that supposedly is designed to help the American people, I would make sure the fine print contains something extraordinary, something that reduces the tax burden for donors while quietly shifting the burden to the people who work for a living, the middle class, the people who wake up early, drive to work, and believe the system is designed for them. If I were a crooked politician, I would ensure that teachers and plumbers and small business owners pay their taxes automatically, straight out of their paychecks every 2 weeks before they ever see it. But billionaires, billionaires would have strategies, carried interest, loss harvesting, foundation deductions, asset-backed borrowing so they never have to sell anything and therefore never have to pay capital gains. And when someone points that out, I would say with a perfectly straight face, we must protect the job creators. Now, if I were a crooked politician, I would also discover something very profitable. War. War is extraordinary for business, not for soldiers and not for taxpayers, but for contractors. Oh, yes. Because a war, once started, rarely ends quickly. And a conflict that lasts 20 years, well, that's practically an annuity. Billions for equipment, billions for logistics, billions for rebuilding things we destroyed ourselves. And every time somebody asks why we are still there, I would say something noble. National security or defending democracy. Now, if I were a crooked politician, I would make absolutely certain that the public never noticed the math because the middle class pays the most taxes. Most of them, not the billionaires, not the multinational corporations that magically report profits in places with names like Luxembourg or the Cayman Islands, but the people earning $50,000, $70,000, $100,000, the people who believe they are still climbing the ladder, even though the ladder has been quietly pulled up. Now, if I were a crooked politician, I would also need something else. Division. Oh, division is essential because if the people ever stop fighting each other, they might start asking questions, and we can't have that. Dangerous questions like, why do both parties pass budgets that grow the national debt? Why do campaign donors seem to win no matter who wins the election? Why do politicians enter office worth a few $100,000 and leave worth 20 million or hundreds of millions? Oh, no, we can't have that. So instead, I would give the public something else to argue about. Flags, bathrooms, pronouns, history textbooks, statues, anything that keeps neighbors yelling at neighbors instead of asking where the money went. If I were a crooked politician, I would appear on television constantly, on liberal networks telling liberals exactly what they want to hear, on conservative networks telling conservatives exactly what they want to hear. And both sides would be absolutely convinced that I was on their side. Meanwhile, the donors would be happy, very happy. The lobbyists would be happy. The defense contractors would be ecstatic. And the tax code would continue to grow thicker than a Manhattan phone book. 30,000 pages of deductions, exemptions, credits, and loopholes. Not for you. Of course. For the people who paid for the campaign, of course. Now, if I were a crooked politician, I would occasionally pretend to fight corruption. A hearing here, an investigation there, a strongly worded letter, but nothing too serious. Certainly nobody going to jail. And nothing that would actually change the system. Because if the system changed, the money might stop. And if the money stopped, the campaigns might stop. And if the campaign stopped, well, I might have to get a real job, and we can't have that. So if I were a crooked politician, I would count on one thing above all else. Not ignorance, not stupidity, but exhaustion. Because the average person is busy raising kids, busy paying bills, busy trying to keep their head above water. They don't have the time to read 3,000-page spending bills passed at midnight. They don't have the time to trace campaign donations through 5 different shell organizations. They don't have the time to notice that the same companies funding Republicans are also funding Democrats. And so they sigh, they shrug, they say, what can you do? And they go back to work. And so if I were a crooked politician, that would be my masterpiece. Not corruption. Corruption is easy. My masterpiece would be convincing the public that corruption is normal. Nothing can change. That both sides are terrible, so why bother caring? Apathy. That would be the crown jewel. Because as long as people are tired and distracted and arguing with each other, the system continues exactly as designed. And so, if I were a crooked politician, I would smile for the cameras, shake hands with the voters, raise money from the donors, blame the other party, and start another war. Rewrite another tax loophole, and then I'd keep doing exactly what I've been doing for generations. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. As always, take care of yourselves and each other and build that stack.